The second type of research validity is external validity. External validity is the degree to which the results of a study can be applied to other situations. For example, do you take a sample you want to then generalize to a population? We need to differentiate between generalizability and transferability in a study.
For example, if we take a sample from a population and study the relationship between physical activity and physical self-concept in junior high school students, and we find a positive relationship, we can generalize that to other junior high school students. Transferability would be taking that finding of a positive relationship between physical activity in middle school students and self-concept and transferring it to high school students.
Would that relationship that's found in junior high school students transfer to secondary school students? We use the term generalizability in the text to include transferability.
Now, there are many threats to external validity, just as there were threats to internal validity. And once again, these are listed for you on the screen, but we will not go into detail here because we have done that in the text.
Importantly, they are considerations for every study. You want to make sure that your study results generalize to some other population. And in order to do that, you have to have strong external validity. Importantly, there's a relationship between internal validity and external validity. Internal validity is the most important concept, but you do need to consider both internal and external validity.
Now, we can increase external validity by being very careful about our definition of our population and by sampling appropriately from that population. Also by being very careful in the description of all the aspects with which the study was conducted. For example, what was the exact treatment that was used, what equipment was used, what modalities, if there were any, that were used, and define these completely enough that somebody else could replicate them. So replication has to do with external validity, and there are two different types, complete or conceptual. Complete replication means to completely repeat a study using exactly the same treatments, same types of subjects, and so forth, whereas conceptual replication means that you would alter a few things, or maybe even just one thing. You might change to the type of subject, you might use a modified treatment,
or a different measure of the dependent variable.
Right.
One person might measure VO2 max on a treadmill, another person might do it on a swimming flume or a cycloergometer or a field test of some sort.
But the idea still is to see if the results that you got in the first study replicate themselves in the conceptual. One issue in external validity has to do with much of the research in the past has been done on males. And the question is, does it replicate to female subjects? The results vary. If we are convinced that the results of an observed study reflect associations which are real, we can ask ourselves whether or not we can extrapolate these results to the larger population from which the participants themselves are drawn, or even to other populations which are identical or at least very similar. The most common question is whether results obtained for men also apply to women. For years, studies, and in particular occupational epidemiological investigations, have been conducted exclusively among men. Studies among chemists carried out in the 1960s and 1970s in the United States, United Kingdom, and Sweden all found increased risks of specific cancers. Based on what we knew of the effects of exposure to solvents and some other chemicals, we could already have deduced at the time that laboratory work also entailed carcinogenic risk for women. This, in fact, was shown to be the case when the first study among women chemists was finally published in the mid-'80s. It is worth noting that other excess cancers found were tumors of the breast and ovary, traditionally considered to be related only to endogenous factors or reproduction, but for which many newly suspected environmental factors such as pesticides may play a role. Much more work needs to be done on occupational determinants of female cancers.
There's a relationship between internal and external validity. Both are important in any study that you would conduct. Internal validity gets at the truthfulness of the conclusions that you've drawn about a relationship between X and Y. External validity has to do with generalizability or transferability of the results that you obtained in your study in another study. Whenever you modify internal or external validity, it has an influence on the other type of research validity. For example, with pretesting.
Unfortunately, internal and external validity are often inversely related. The pretesting example that Jim mentioned is as follows. To increase internal validity, you may pretest your subjects to assure yourself that they were randomly equivalent to begin with. Unfortunately, pretesting the subjects is detrimental to external validity because the group to which you wish to generalize the population, of course, has not been pretested. So will the results of your study on subjects that have been pretested actually apply to the population of people who have not been pretested?